Minutes past Central African time, and we're going to be moving to Venezuela now, a country that is sitting on the world's largest oil reserves, but one whose industry has been battered by years and years of political crisis, sanctions, and underinvestment. Oil exports are now surging, with around half of Venezuela's oil output reportedly heading to the United States of America. But with President Nicolas Maduro now in U.S. custody and Venezuela undergoing what looks and feels like a major political and economic realignment, the big question is, can this oil boom actually translate into a recovery for ordinary Venezuelans? And joining us from Osaka is international human rights and humanitarian lawyer, Professor Saul Takahashi. Prof, thank you so much for joining us once again. Welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me. It's good to see you again.
Pleasure is all ours. And I think we can kickstart this conversation with a bigger, broader picture. From your perspective, just a quick analysis on the situation in Venezuela right now, especially looking at President Maduro in U.S. custody and the events of the latter part of last year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, the situation, what happened in Venezuela, that is to say, what the United States did in Venezuela, and what the United States has been doing in Iran, together with Israel, what they've been doing against Iran, it's not said enough. And I hate to sort of keep on beating this drum, but I do think, we have to recall these are complete violations of international law. There's no legal justification for any of this. Both of these are blatant and overt acts of aggression in complete contravention of the UN Charter and of principles of international law. I mean, this is the crime of aggression. I mean, it's very, very clear, and I think that has to be said. Now, when it comes to Venezuela, look, whether the proceeds are going to be used for the benefit of the people of Venezuela, I think first and foremost, we have to look and see whether the proceeds are even going to be given to Venezuela to begin with. Venezuela, after this illegal act of aggression on the part of the United States, where they use the military to, again, illegally enter and invade the country and abducted the head of state and took him back to the United States. They put him on trial. I mean, I think certainly, I'm sure it's a foregone conclusion, but we have to see what happens with that. And look, what's happening in Venezuela really, for all intents and purposes, it's basically a colony of the United States, or protectorate of the United States, if you like. Now, Trump has made such announcements over and over, mentioning that he's going to, we are going to take the oil. And that's basically what they're doing. Now, whether the proceeds are being paid, fairly by the United States to the National Oil Company of Venezuela, I hear conflicting things about this. I don't know. I don't have any kind of inside information. But given the way that Trump is in general, given the way that the United States has acted against the sovereignty of Venezuela from the get-go, I would be very surprised if Venezuela is getting anywhere close to a fair shake. And by the same rights, frankly, I would be very surprised if the people of the United States were seeing any of that money either. I mean, these profits are going to U.S. oil companies and their shareholders and their CEOs with their multi-million-dollar paychecks. And, this is what's happening here. So I really don't see this money being used for the benefit of anybody except Trump and people in his orbit. So, that's really what I think the situation is in Venezuela. I mean, what it started off as an illegal act of aggression. Basically, Venezuela is being controlled by the United States and oil interests, American oil interests right now. And, that's really what the situation is here. So I think, that's how we have to look at things.
Has this always been the end goal for the United States of America, not just the Trump administration? Because we know that diplomatic relations with Venezuela and the U.S. Have not been at their best for a very, very long time. I think since the end of World War II, really. Has this always been the end goal, to have Venezuela's oil exports surging and almost half of them going to the United States of America at what I think we can all assume is below market prices?
The short answer is yes, of course. That's always been the U.S. goal here, as it has always been, since the Cold War. The U.S. goal to basically to do the same thing to Cuba.
Mm,
But what's different now with Trump is this, very overt, very bullish, and completely illegal actions that the U.S. government is taking. Again, the U.S. is no stranger to illegality when it comes to international law and the use of aggression. That's obvious, and we don't have the time, to go through, the many instances of illegal aggression that the United States has engaged in since the Cold War and ever since it's ended. But what's happening now is I believe that it's being ramped up, right? I mean, there was always the pretense in the American government that the US stood for national sovereignty and freedom and liberty for all. That was always a pretense, and that was a facade. And we all understood, especially people in Latin America, we all knew that the US treated the entire region like its backyard, and it could do what it's want and it could act like a playground bully, and that's basically what it did, and nobody would hold it to account. That was always the case, but there was at least a facade. And when you have a facade like that, when it's part of the whole national narrative, then it does make it difficult to do certain things. Again, I'm not saying the Americans never did anything illegal in Latin America or elsewhere, certainly the Middle East, and just to name a few. Of course they did. But there was always this facade, and there was an attempt to sort of scurry around and justify what they were doing and what they had done using international law, right? So, there was at least this notion that they had to act in accordance with international norms. But now that's just completely gone into the toilet. I mean, Trump, Rubio, and all these fascists, this motley crew of fascists that they've cobbled together for their government. They are stating overtly, international law got nothing to do with us. Latin America, the Western Hemisphere, this is our backyard. We're dominant here. We'll let the Russians do what they want in Europe. We'll let the Chinese do what they want in East Asia. That's their backyards. But right here, we're king. We're the playground bully, and we're going to do what they want. Trump, in an interview, stated that international law basically means nothing to him. The only thing that can stop him is his own morality. I can't even imagine a lower bar than the morality of Donald Trump. The fact that I'm even using the word morality in Donald Trump, the fact that I'm even using these words in the same sentence is almost ridiculous. And then you have Rubio, who is, he's the brains of the whole operation. He is going and addressing European leaders, saying that, we have to go back to being proud of our colonial past, and we've got to go back and do the same kind of things there. And we mustn't forget he got a standing ovation from all the Western European leaders there. So it's not so much that what the Americans are doing in Venezuela and what they are doing also against Cuba, it's not so much that it's brand new or that it's something which we had, it's not so much that we had never seen it before. But what is unprecedented is this complete disregard of any kind of international norms, and this overt, in your face statements that we don't care about international norms. Go ahead and try and make us. It's what they're doing against the International Criminal Court, for example. Just this morning, my time, I woke up to see the news that the yet another judge and a senior prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, they have had sanctions levied against them, again, for no other reason than to try to hold Israel accountable and to try to advance the cause of international justice. And it's very difficult to imagine American governments in the past going that far. Yes, they did not become a state party to the International Criminal Court. Yes, the Congress passed a law saying that the American president is authorized to use force to rescue American or allied personnel, and there's a list of countries there, includes Israel, and I'm ashamed to say it includes my own country, Japan, as well. But they are authorized to use military force to rescue personnel that have been extradited to the Netherlands to stand trial in the ICC. So they've done these things, but never has it been so in your face. Never has it been so, I guess I would say, extreme. It's a continuum, of course, and so what we're witnessing now from the U.S. is basically the end result of everything that's been going on for decades. But it is still shocking to see. And so, that's that's why seeing what's happening in Venezuela is so, it's shocking and concerning, but in a way it's not surprising because, this is how things are now.
In closing, what could come next now for Venezuela? They have an interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, if I'm not mistaken, who essentially doesn't have any kind of power. I think she was installed after Maduro was essentially kidnapped by the United States of America back in January of this year. What could come next now? What happens? Because you can't have an interim government, an interim president for perpetuality.
Well, again, it's kind of hard to talk about Venezuela as a sovereign country right now. Really what it is. I used the word colony before. I mean, colony sort of implies somewhat different things. Though, we could sort of have academic debates about that. But it's really basically being controlled by the United States. So it's really, you say that we can't have an interim government forever. Well, I disagree. If that's what the Americans want, if it suits Donald Trump and the oligarchs and other corrupt sorts in his orbit, well, that's probably what will happen. It's very concerning for the people of Venezuela. It's very concerning for the people of Latin America. And it's very concerning for people everywhere in the world, because lest we forget, what we're witnessing in the Persian Gulf with the U.S. and Israel's illegal war of aggression against Iran, and the thousands of civilians who've been killed in Iran. This was at least partially encouraged by the fact that this, Trump managed to carry out his plans in Venezuela so easily. I mean, it was very much a cakewalk. So we are led to believe, and so we understand that meant, Trump again. Trump is basically a big, one big ego, walking ego, and he figured since it worked with Venezuela, it's going to work anywhere. The American military might is going to carry the day, no matter what happens, no matter where we are. All I have to do is bully people, strong arm people. It's the thing is, and again, America is no stranger to illegality and illegal aggression. I mean, presidents for decades have done these kind of things, but Trump is a special case because he is so unfit in every way, shape, or form for the office that he holds. And looking at his career up to before he became president, basically, he's basically escaped any measure of accountability, and basically got his way in many ways, just basically by being a bully, by strong arming people, by basically by being a bully. And now he's got the ultimate tool, or at least so he thinks. He's got what he believes is the ultimate tool, the American military, that he thinks is his own. He thinks is his own personal enforcement, group of enforcers. And with those in his pocket, he can do whatever he wants. He can bend anybody's will to what he wants. That's what he believes. And the Iranians, it's looking, are going to prove him wrong. So let's see what happens. That's why he's so upset right now. That's why he's even more full of profanities and outbursts than he always is because he's realized he can't cajole and strong arm the Iranians to do his bidding. So it's unfortunately, it's right now it's a pretty dark picture for the people of Venezuela, people of Cuba, but it's a dark picture everywhere
Mm,
because Trump believes in that might is right. Trump believes in a return to the law of the jungle because he thinks that America is the strongest and they can beat anybody. So the law of the jungle suits the United States. That's what he believes, but he's wrong. And he's going to be proven wrong probably by the Iranians and over again. So it's a dark day right now. I mean, these are dark times, and
mm,
that's the picture, I'm afraid.
Very, very bleak picture that you're painting there, Prof.
I'm afraid
I
so.
want I want to wrap up with the midterms. I think conversations around just how
Mhm.
much of the midterms are going to influence a lot of these diplomatic kind of squabbles, if I can put it that way, that we're seeing involving the United States. It almost feels like everything hinges on that. Would that be a fair assessment that the midterms coming up later on in the year could have some kind of influence of where we all find ourselves currently?
Well, in a sane world, yes. I mean, in a sane world, what will presumably happen is the Republicans will be completely trounced. The Democrats will take the House and perhaps even the Senate, and they will move forward to presumably to impeach Trump for his countless crimes and misdemeanors,
Mm,
and that's what will happen. However, I am very skeptical that the United States right now is a sane situation. Look, from the get-go, from the time that he assumed office again, well, frankly, from the time that he was kicked out the last time, Trump has made his intentions very clear. This notion that America is the exceptional country and the United States is the greatest democracy in the world. This is really just a pipe dream, and
mm,
there for sure Trump's intentions are to interfere with the 2026 midterms. For sure, the intention is to try to make sure that voting does not take place in any real, fair, and open way, and to basically, to use his term, to rig the elections. And if I mean, the thing is that with the midterms, these kind of things take time. These kind of things
mm.
take time to prepare and take time to do, and it's just something which he can't just snap his fingers and do. Again, he's used to doing that kind of thing, snapping his fingers and have everybody jump to it, and having his bending everybody else's will. But again, this is another reason I believe he's very irritated, because he's realizing that that can't be the case. And there might be a relatively free and fair election, and it might make life very difficult for him. But I think in that case, what will he do? He'll just announce that it was that the Democrats cheated, that
Mm.
quote unquote everybody knows that the corruption was just on a scale we have never seen, blah blah blah, and then we have to see. 2026 midterms, that's going to be a big flashpoint. But 2028, the presidential elections, there's no doubt in my mind that the plan has been from the beginning. 2025 January, the plan has been from that time not to hold elections in 2028.
I want to park
Uh,
it there. I want to
yeah,
park it there, Prof. This is a conversation that I want us to take on
yes,
some
sure,
other time. We have unfortunately run out of time, but thank you so much. Always a pleasure
sure.
having you.
Thanks very much. Good to see you.
There we go. Professor Saul Takahashi, international human rights and humanitarian lawyer, helping us understand the politics of the US, oil, Venezuela, and how it affects all of us. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we head over to Malawi, where there are plans to send 500 nurses to Israel. Ugh.